Alright guys, and welcome to another video. Today I'm giving you my Priest TBC leveling guide. This video will cover a number of very important topics to speed up your leveling. Firstly, leveling tips, talents, playstyle and rotation for the fastest kill time and efficiency, stats and gear to focus on, and then classic WoW gear to keep while leveling. So, first leveling tip I'm going to go through very quickly because I've mentioned it in all of my other leveling guides. If you combine the mithril spells, riding skill, glove enchant, and the carrot on a stick, you will increase your mount speed to 218%, so get on it, and use the add-on auto carrot to automatically equip all those item pieces whenever you mount up and de-equip them when you demount. Next you want to down rank Psychic Scream, since you will be using it quite often and it will serve you a little bit of mana. You are actually going to be leashing targets, so once you get a target down to about 25% health, you're going to leave your dots on that target and then run to the next mob, but you're going to put that mob into a fear so he doesn't DPS you. It's more efficient to leave dots on your first target while you're moving on to the second target rather than just face tanking the mob and wanding. Always remember to maintain the inner fire buff because it will make your shield last longer, because overall it will make you take less damage. Before TBC launches, try and grab yourself some half decent best in slot Shadow Priest gear, which is basically very similar to Warlock gear. If you can stack about 500 spell power running into TBC, you can become an insane AoE cleaving god. Your damage is insane when you're spreading your dots, and also you have really great sustainability to tank all the damage that you're taking. So honestly, you're not very far behind a mage when it comes to your AoE farming power. Just a quick note, when TBC launches, your tier 3 healing gear will change. You will actually get spell damage, a little bit of spell damage, from your healing gear. But honestly, it's not a lot. Okay, you probably only get about 200 to 300 spell power from your healing gear. So yeah, make sure to grab some decent spell power gear before you jump into TBC. One thing you can do is get the level 60 PvP gear because it becomes much easier to obtain in the TBC pre-pack. Remember that you can take advantage of mind control to take on very difficult elite quests. Don't neglect to bring bandages because you can't heal inside shadow form, so it's more efficient to just put a bandage on yourself rather than breaking shadow form and then breaking back into shadow form. It costs a little bit of mana to do that, and plus obviously healing costs a little bit of mana, so a lot of the time it is better to just bring bandages. Also, remember to pick up that really useless trinket that's been disenchanted probably about 20 times in your guild right now from Blackwing Lair, the Aegis of Preservation, because when you have multiple enemies hitting you, the effect of that trinket is multiplied and it's ridiculously good for when you're doing AoE farming. You can also use the ability Vampiric Embrace when you have got it talented to top your health back up if you ever lose any health. Now let's jump into the talents. So the philosophy behind the talents is, first of all, increasing all of your dot damage, then it's sustainability when it comes to self-healing, and then self-mana preservation. First thing we're going to do is max out Blackout and Spirit Tap. So the reason why we're getting Blackout is because you have an extra ability, an extra dot in TBC called Vampiric Touch, which is at the bottom of a talent tree, which increases the chance for Blackout to proc. It also procs on a number of different effects, like particular priest racial abilities, which we'll talk about later. And then when you get a stun on an enemy, obviously it massively reduces the damage you take, but it's very useful for when you're doing AoE farming, because you will probably stun multiple enemies at once. When you're leashing to the next target but you don't have Psychic Scream available, a Blackout stun might proc, which just smooths out your experience while leveling just a little bit more. Obviously we're going to max out Spirit Tap. Whenever you kill an enemy you gain 100% extra spirit. When you're jumping into TBC, a lot of people are going to be in healer gear and they're going to have a lot of spirit, so Spirit Tap is very powerful when it comes to mana efficiency. Then we're going to get improved Shadow Word Pain. There's actually more of a godsend than you realise, because it just makes the rotation so much easier. You will not have to refresh Shadow Word Pain when you're leashing to the next enemy. It's very nice. At this point you have a little bit of a choice. If you have a lot of spell hit gear, then you want to go for improved Psychic Scream. If you're running into TBC with basically mostly healer gear, then you want to get 5 points into Shadow Focus, but again you got to feel the waters with level 60 enemies, like how much hit chance do you actually have. So we'll put 2 points in Improved Psychic Scream, 3 points into Shadow Focus, we'll get Mind Flay, because we will be using that from time to time. Then we want Shadow Reach, then we want to max out Shadow Weaving. You will be able to stack Shadow Weaving up very quickly on enemies, and it really does help to rot them down. Shadow Reach helps out a lot to spread your dots onto enemies that are really far away, because the more you have to run to an enemy, the more the enemies that you already have pulled are going to attack you. Plus sometimes you run so far that the mobs reset, so this really helps getting more and more enemies clumped up to start spamming Holy Nova, but we'll talk about that more later. Then we want Vampiric Embrace and Improved Vampiric Embrace. We will use the healing from this ability very often. It's an absolute lifesaver. Then we're just going to max out Darkness, then get into Shadow Form. Then from here you've got like 1 extra talent point. You can spend pretty much whatever you want. Probably just want to get it into Shadow Focus for the off chance you're going to take on like higher level enemies. Then you want to max out Misery, and then obviously get Vampiric Touch, and then we're going to leave the Shadow Tree and go into the Holy Tree actually instead of the Discipline Tree. However, this is only for people who are running into TBC with a lot of spell power gear, like we said before, 500 spell power. Okay, if you know you're running in with healer gear, I'm going to show you a different build, but when you have managed to get enough gear from TBC to get about 500 spell power, then you will go for this build. First of all, we're just going to max out all the talents in tier 1. Honestly, these talents don't really matter that much apart from Holy Specialization and Healing Focus. They're quite useful, but these talents are kind of not really useful for our playstyle, neither is Improve Renew. And then we're going to get, now we're level 60, so when you get to level 61, you're going to get 1 point into Holy Nova, and then you can start doing insane AoE pulls. To be honest, you can actually do it without Holy Nova, just not pull as many. Obviously we'll talk about that more in the playstyle section, I keep saying that, but But if you're running into TBC without that much spell power gear, you're mostly in healing gear, then what you want to do is you off-spec into Discipline. You just max out 1 specialization, you get Improved Power Word, Fortitude, and Improved Power Word Shield. And then when you start to level up, you want to put points into Meditation, okay? But then you want to swap into off-spec and into Holy when you get a little bit more cheeky spell power. You may also want to put a point into Silence whenever you're dealing with extremely irritating caster enemies. Then with this build you're going to finish a talent in Inner Focus and then just finish off in Shadow Power. And then obviously for the AoE build you just want to finish your points into Blessed Recovery, then you put 1 point Inspiration, and honestly to just get down the tree. This Blessed Recovery is actually quite nice, just provides a little bit of extra sneaky healing, but you mainly just want Holy Reach for, increasing the range of Holy Nova, and then honestly you can just finish the talents wherever you want, if you want to pick up Silence for utility or, anything like that. Now let's run through the rotation and playstyle. Obviously there's going to be 2 different playstyles depending on whether you're running into TBC with predominantly healing gear and you have under 200 spell power, or if you're running into TBC with some decent spell power gear and you've got over like 400 to 500 spell power. So if you're in healer gear, you want to take it a little easy. First of all, check buffs and shield. Open combat with Vampiric Touch into a Mind Blast before the mob gets into melee range. Then you Shadow Word Pain, then you do a couple of Mind Flays, pop the mob into a Fear, and then just move on to the next one. The mob should die by your dots running around in that Fear. If you don't have Fear available, it's fine, still move on to the next mob and just face tank it. You can take the damage from one mob, it's totally fine. Use Vampiric Touch if you are actually struggling to keep your health topped up. Another thing to bear in mind, if your spell power is fairly low, then Mind Flay will probably do less damage than your wand if you have a really good wand, so you may want to use your wand instead of Mind Flay, but when you start to get more spell power gear from TBC quests, then Mind Flay will likely take over on damage, and it also obviously increases the chance for your Blackout Stun to proc, and also increases the, proc speed of Shadow Weaving and everything like that. But honestly, when you don't have a lot of spell power, Mind Flay just hits like a noodle. But if you're running into TBC with a decent amount of spell power gear, you can absolutely unleash hell into Outland. So first of all, you check your buffs and your shield. Then what you want to start doing is ping pong pulling with Vampiric Touch and Pain. You pull as many mobs as you can. Personally, I've been able to deal with like 8 mobs at once, so experiment, see how confident you are, and see how powerful your character is. Then you want to put Vampiric Embrace, so that all of the shadow damage that's taken away and all these multiple enemies gets returned to you as a cheeky little bit of healing. Well, actually it's not a little bit, it's actually quite a lot. Then you clump them all together and start spamming Holy Nova. I normally start to do this when I've got at least like 25% health, because I want enough mana left over to be able to spam Holy Nova, and then I also want to have enough mana to use Shield or Psychic Scream just in case that I get into trouble. I've actually done the pull without even using Shield at all, and the healing from Vampiric Embrace should keep you topped up, but it's just safer to use Power Word Shield. It also reduces the cast interruption that melee hits give you, so it's normally better off to just, you know, do the pull with Shield up. But the reason why I mention this is just because Vampiric Embrace, you know, gives you so much healing, and you know, on top of that you've got Holy Nova ticking away too. It will be very difficult for you to die if you're continuously just burning your mana on Holy Nova and, you know, other abilities. If the enemies become stunned by your blackout stun, then just move over to that enemy and try to clump them around the stunned enemies. Obviously this will glug a lot of mana, but it's fine because you're taking down so many enemies at once. It's still very, very efficient. Just bring really good mana food, obviously, so you can regenerate your mana very quickly, and because you're going to have Spirit Tap procced as well, when you stop to drink you will get your mana back even faster. It may also be worth swapping to a really high spirit weapon just before you stop to eat. It may even be a combination of two items, like your healing mace and your healing offhand item with loads of spirit on. Next thing we need to highlight before we're done with this section is how useful the priest racial specific abilities are. First of all, we have Touch of Weakness, which is available for the Blood Elf and Undead. So basically enemies get hit by shadow damage whenever they hit you, and this shadow damage also has a chance to proc, first of all, Shadow Weaving, procs Misery, and then also the blackout stun effect that we talked before. And if you've got multiple enemies attacking you, you know, you have a big chance of proccing that blackout stun. It also scales with shadow talent and spell power, and it also debuffs the enemies by reducing their melee damage, so it is very useful for when you're doing this AoE farming method. Next we have Shadow Guard. It's very similar to Touch of Weakness, but it's essentially a lightning shield but for priests, and like I said before, it procs all the priest effects, and this is only available to the troll. We also have Loon's Grace, which is only available to Night Elves. It reduces the chance for you to take damage by 20%. It lasts a big 15 seconds and it's only on a 3-minute cooldown, so this is very useful for, again, when doing AoE farming, because you're taking a lot of melee damage. This is going to reduce the chance of you taking that melee damage by 20%. We also have Star Shards, which is very nice to use because it's totally free of mana, doesn't get in the way of your rotation at all. It's basically a mini Shadow Word Pain. You should be using it on cooldown. It's only 30-second cooldown too, so that's pretty Bob's your uncle. May also want to take advantage of feedback. Only humans get this ability, but whenever you're taking damage from magic damage, whether that magic damage is from a melee, you know, enemy, or it's primarily going to come from spellcasters, you will actually start to deal damage back to them based on the amount of mana damage that they do, and you'll also drain their mana. That's not really that useful because you're going to kill them before their mana drains, but still, you're going to counteract a little bit of extra damage back to the enemies. Shadow damage, which will also proc everything else, like the Shadow Guard and Touch of Weakness spells, so you really cannot complain. So let's talk about the stats and gear that you want to prioritise as a priest while levelling up. First of all, you obviously want to keep your healer gear, so don't like start vendoring or anything like that, you know, put it in your bank when you start to replace it with TBC questing gear. So what you want to do is you just basically want to go for pieces with the most amount of spell power on them, okay, and then after that you focus on spell hit gear, because haste and crit won't benefit you that much while leveling, because most of your damage is coming from dots, right? You're basically just killing enemies with dots, and that's it, and haste and crit do not benefit your dots at all, which is kind of sad. It's only in Wrath of the Lich King where like dots can crit and the haste increases the, you know, frequency of dots occurring, so it's a bit of a shame. So honestly, you just focus on getting really big fat spell power gear, and then after that focus on getting your pre-raid best in slot gear, whether that's healing gear or Shadow Priest gear. Now let's talk about some of the classic gear pieces that you definitely want to keep. Obviously, we'll probably want to keep your tier pieces if you're going for healing, like we just mentioned before. You You want to keep the Blackwing Lair trinket, like we mentioned at the beginning of the video, because that is very useful for AoE farming. And then another really big piece is the Mark of a Champion, okay, because that also affects demons on top of undead. There's actually a lot of undead and demons in TBC, and you know, if you're in healing gear, then you are going to struggle to get enough spell power gear to start stomping on enemies. But this Mark of a Champion gives you a ridiculous amount of spell power stats, which is obviously very nice. Apart from that, you want to get your hands on spell power cooldown trinkets like Talisman of Ethereal Power, Sapphiron's Eye, Neltharian's Tear. That's not a cooldown one, but it is still very useful. Particularly if you stack it with Mark of a Champion, you'll get like over 100 spell power on demons, which would be a really nice boost for when you're running around in healer gear. You obviously also want to keep Anathema if it is more powerful than any other weapon that you can get instead. But anyway guys, that is the end of the video. My name is MetaGoblin. Until my next video, ciao.